We've asked you to speak with us this afternoon regarding quite a wide range of topics, but mostly for this to be a very practical session. So DFA is really excited to have her with us, particularly because she's got huge experience around distribution and the stuff that we tend to just close our eyes to when we're busy making the film. So hopefully this is going to be quite helpful in terms of just giving a better background and a better process for what kind of things you need to be thinking about as you go forward now into looking for partners at Sheffield. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll just introduce myself a little bit more because I only know like 2-3 people here, which is, I've never come across any of the rest of you. So I'm really happy to see you and meet you and get to know a little bit about you. So I've been working at STEPS with, maybe you know Don Hickins more than you know anyone else, at our organization for 18 years now. And so I've come through all the various projects, mostly in a production management capacity, and now I'm pretty much running the AfriDocs platform. I'm the acquisitions manager for AfriDocs, and for those of you who don't know it, it's an online documentary platform where we have a selection of what we think are some of the best documentaries that are available to an African audience. So I'm going to be speaking in that capacity today, and since what I fill my days with is watching documentaries from 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock in the afternoon and negotiating license agreements, I'm hoping that there are some questions you have that I can answer, and yeah, we can sort of just learn from each other about that. So I was hoping, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here for the first part of this workshop because I've clearly now missed a huge chunk of important information. I was hoping that I could hear about each of your projects, but you've already done that and don't, I think, want to do it again. So maybe I'll just kick off saying that since you guys are all going to Sheffield, maybe the focus is slightly different to what we look for in films, because we do look for films that are relevant to an African audience. Not necessarily African in its content, but something that audiences in Africa can relate to. So it could be a global story, but it's something that we feel audiences in Africa would benefit from seeing. Our criteria is sort of a mishmash, but mostly I will say that we look for strong narratives. And so rather than sort of heavy journalistic films, we're more into creative documentaries that have a good narrative, a strong character, protagonist, maybe a moral issue that is highlighted, and there's a spotlight on different angles to that issue that maybe have not been seen before, or a strong stance on something where the opposite stance is also highlighted and people can see things from a different angle. Yeah, I mean, does anyone have any questions so that we can kind of take the conversation along a bit more?
When do you get involved in the project?
So, because we have very little funding, it's mostly at the end when there's a completed film. We will do letters of interest and maybe put in a little bit of money if it's something that speaks very strongly to us and something that we can see we definitely want to be a part of, but it will be a small amount of finance. So mostly at the end.
So how do you generate an income?
We are funded by a foundation, by the Bertha Foundation, and that enables us to enter into license agreements where we pay smallish license fees, and yeah.
Okay, if you fund some smaller guy, you know, just a small little amount, are you profiting as well, or is that just the?
We don't make any profit from this. It is It's just a passion for documentary and getting films out there to audiences that ordinarily wouldn't see this kind of quality of documentary. So if you're not able to go to festivals, you can still see the stuff that is.
Where? On the channel?
It's online.
Online.
Is it because I've watched some of the content? Is it all free, or is some of it paid for you as well?
It's all free.
All free.
And then the other thing, did you mention now that it's an online platform as well?
I think I did it initially, but
I find that useful.
yeah.
I mean, there's great films that you can watch, especially now that we finally have Father. So that's for, I don't know,
Yeah.
DSTV. So I think for most of us, probably more likely to have Father than DSTV. It's
For sure,
way to
yeah.
see films.
So it's afridocs.net if anyone wants to check it out.
So if you support some project or some is already in post production, and you see the essence of it and the future, would you take them under your wings and pass them on to distributors or sellers or sales?
It would depend on what the film is. So we have a network of distributors that we work quite closely with, because that's where we acquire most of our films from. So for sure we could pass on and share those connections. In terms of providing some kind of financial support, we could do a pre-buy or something like that. We don't have the capability or the capacity to take projects sort of under our wing in terms of, working and providing post-production support or so forth. But, it depends on the project. If there's somebody that we know that, fits very well with your project and we think would be quite interested in it, we could for sure facilitate that.
With your license agreements, I'm quite new to all of this. So my understanding is it's territory based. So do you cover all of Africa, and filmmakers, could they still have another license agreement with somebody from Europe or wherever?
Sure. So our Afridocs is geo-blocked just for Africa. That's the territory that we cover, and it is a non-exclusive license agreement. So you could sell to someone else in Africa if you wanted to, for sure. But yeah, and then the rest of the world.
Can I ask you to just say something about thinking about your distribution early in the project?
Yeah.
Because I think that was really valuable, and I agree totally.
Okay. So I was speaking earlier, just on the side, I was saying that I think a lot of the filmmakers that I come into contact with to try and acquire their films have not really thought of distribution before they started making the film. And it's something that they leave right until the end, and then very often they get into agreements that they haven't carefully thought through and feel that they're somehow being hard done by and cheated out of an income. And so I think that that initial agreement, when you're plotting out your production plan, to very early on include distribution and to make sure there is money for it. Because it is an important part of your film. Once you've made it, you want it to get out there, and whether that's just a festival distribution or broadcast or online or just sales, you need to have a strategy for that.
No. So I know Indigenous films and I know Gravel Road films. Are there other distributors that we should be getting to know who you work with?
Yeah, we work predominantly with European distributors. They seem to be the ones that buy African content in spades. I've yet to come across a distributor locally that we search for films, and the films are often with European, mostly French distributors.
That's because the filmmakers got their funding. Because it's African films to be distributed.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Or we just go straight to the filmmaker, like
Oh,
Nikki.
So don't need to have.
You don't have to have a distributor, but then you need to be quite clear about what your strategy is. We've dealt with a lot of filmmakers, but you don't have to use an agency.
And usually those bigger budget films that you show need all those distributors online early in order to raise the money for archive, music, post. So by the time it gets to Afterdocs, it's the end of a long tail, and they just want their film to really be seen by the audiences at home, and nobody's able to buy them in Africa because either you have to pay to put your film onto some of these channels. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So here's an amazing service. It's available for Africa to your audiences, and these are important films. They're important stories. So what a service. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to just say, because I think a lot of filmmakers get quite nervous at the prospect of having their film available for free online. So if you have a strategy and you want to make sure that your film isn't just available on YouTube for the whole world to see, but you first want to do your festival run, that's fine. You can do that for a year or two and then come to us once you've done festival and broadcast or whatever it is. There are all kinds of deals we can do, and if you don't want your film to be online for 5 years, you want it to be online for a year or a couple of months at a time because you have a strategy, there's an event happening, like Aliki's film, we've Striker Rock, we've had up on the channel, and they've asked us if we can take it down for a bit so that they can do a deal, and then we'll put it up again. So there are all those sort of permutations that are possible.
But read the fine print of all your distribution and be clear that you know what you're doing, and take legals in with you or have somebody on the side. You guys offer legals, right?
Not explicitly as a service, but we can advise, yeah.
Because this is how you get paid. I mean, these guys are great, but they're honest. It's not big money. And it really is about getting eyeballs to your film. Anne said she had a film that she completed, she just wants to give it away, because it's been made and she's not really looking for a return on that. It was a passion project. So there are different films that need different kinds of distribution, but if you make a film, you need people to have seen it and to reflect on the story. Otherwise, why did you make it?
So I've been reading one of these different strategies, and somebody on some forum online was saying the standard formula is to send to festivals, try and get a couple of awards or get accepted to their festivals so you can put those juicy laurels on your film, get it onto a platform like Afterdocs where it's marketed that this one got these fancy awards, so that gets more buzz, more eyeballs on it, have that for a period, and then you've got those stats. So many millions of people have watched this film, and then after all of that, you can actually do a sale, with somebody who has lots and lots of money. But I don't know, is that...
Doesn't it
high
actually
experience
lose
or-
prestige at
Yeah.
a certain point? And when you go to festivals, I've applied and had films in a few, what they say is this going to be an American premiere? Is it going to be an East Coast or West Coast premiere? Is it a European premiere? Because if you're saying, no, sorry, it's been at the LA Film Festival, it's been at the United Nations Association Film Festival, then that loses some of the cachet of your film. It loses, it's not so sexy anymore. They can't sell it in quite the same way. So one has to be aware of all those things too.
That's festival strategy. So you're allowed a country premiere, and you can still have a world premiere. I think that's the way it goes. But most of the prestige festivals want the world premiere. So Toronto, Berlin, Cannes, they want world premieres typically.
Yeah.
And they're a national premiere. Sometimes it's only one screening allowed for those big film festivals. But like Khalid said, if you've got money from Doha, it's big budget money that they've given you. They demand the premiere. But once a festival film has gone to North America, et cetera, the cachet of having been in those festivals and curated is actually important enough. And you could get a film going to 60 festivals, and if they each pay you, hopefully $150 or something each, that adds up to a chunk of change. So you shouldn't be paying to enter films after a while. You should be invited. And Simon Woods, who presented at here at Encounters, that lovely short film that he did, his film is just it's continuing in that life because it's quite a strange film about that artist, what's Orbis, yeah. And that kind of film is just going to go on forever and ever and ever. And eventually that return adds to your investment.
What is the name of the film?
Orbis. It's just such an easy film to remember because when it got into hot dogs, I can't remember the title, but the film itself is eclectic, it's unique, it's an original voice, interesting story told beautifully. And now he'll always be curated for a hot dogs, whatever he does. And that's the kind of relationship you're also looking for with festivals, is to become partnered with an esteemed festival. If it's IDFA, like you were saying, some people only go to IDFA, but we're hoping some of you always want to go to Sheffield, and some of you always want to go to hot dogs, and some of you always want to go to Sunnyside. And AFI, what is it, American Film Institute?
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's festivals that will connect to you and you'll find your partners around. So festivals are important. I hope you all pay attention to Encounters, to Durban, to all of our local national festivals. But in reality, it's a global place. And if you get enough festival awards, you'll get, and then you sell to Amazon, you'll be on the Prime channel because you'll be paid more because you've got a festival strategy behind you. You've had something out of that. So there's extra money now in the disruptors if you've done well at festivals.
I mean, I think it does depend on what you want your strategy to be. If you're wanting to go to all the prestigious festivals, then you have to be aware that they have certain criteria. You can't have shown it, like Monica's saying. Whatever it is, each festival has their own set of rules. But if that's not your focus and you're just wanting to get your film out there,
Well, so our specific film, we were thinking predominantly of an online audience, but when I read that, I thought, oh, it's interesting that to attract that online audience, you might still want to play the festival market for it's a marketing strategy to get the laurels to attract the audience.
yeah.
So you've got to keep that in mind. But yeah.
I think there are still a lot of people who will watch a film based on the awards that it's won rather than the content of the film. So sure, it is a marketing strategy, but you could just enter it into any festival and put some laurels on it. People, I don't think, are necessarily looking at which festival.
I think it's definitely worth hanging onto a film before putting it online to try and get it to the festivals, because when you're online, you have no interaction with your audience, and there's a lot to be said for being there. I mean, first of all, if you get into it when you get invited, it's fantastic. You're there, and people see your film, and they ask you questions, and it's much nicer than sort of having likes on Facebook. So I think it's very important to hang on, to first go for a theatre festival release.
Are there potential opportunities for viewers and say, does it have, I don't know, I've never done this before, but up there,
Yeah, definitely.
review your film.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's a positive thing, you could put that in the...
And also, if you think about, like, if you can say this is screened at X, Y, and Z festival, people click on that film wherever it is, and they go, oh, okay, well, it was chosen for that in that festival, so it's got to be good. So I'm going to watch it. Otherwise, I don't want to waste 2 hours watching something that might not be good.
I mean, I like that. Maybe I'm terribly narrow-minded, but there's so much content online. I'm definitely going to go for the things with the big awards and whatever. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. How do people find? Do you have quite a sophisticated content management? Like, how do they find films? Do they search?
There is a search. You can look for country-specific, and then just if you know the titles or the subject that you're looking for, like genocide or some other.
First topic that came to mind.
Land grabs or whatever. You can search for it. But we have a newsletter that we send out bi-monthly, so there's that. If you want to subscribe, you'll always know what's available, what's coming up. Otherwise, just searching.
And do you make the stats available to filmmakers of how many people are watching their films, from which regions? Is it?
If you're interested in it, then for sure we can make those stats available. It's quite easy these days with Google Analytics and all kinds of things. You can just pull out the report and send it. So more than willing to do that. Sorry, I don't know what your project is. You're saying you were hoping for an
We're
online.
in very early development stage, but and we're open about formats as well. So we're either going to be doing a 1 hour, sort of 52 minutes, possibly to all short films, all of the above. It's a film about global living wage through the perspective of 3 families in the city. So how they live and work and play and love.
Short works really well for online.
Yeah.
Is there a working title?
How we live.
Are you the only person that, is it just me and you that only arrived now at lunch?
Yeah.
I also arrived.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Could we just kind of like quickly say everybody, like who we are, because I don't know everybody there.
Well, they've actually recorded interviews, so you 3 should introduce yourselves to us.
But we'd like to know his names as well.
Should I be mean and ask the girl to start with this and go this way around this time around?
So I'm Joelle Cheslow, documentary filmmaker, and
I'm Rudolf Rieger.
Pascal Neuschnitzer. Karen Cockett.
Paul Weinberg.
Siobhan Hudson,
Peter Goldsmith.
Teresa Hill.
Mickey Redman-Hayes,
Isaac Jacobson.
Yusuf Miller,
Monica Warwick. Okay, so now we've got the names.
Sheffield
Should we hear from the new members who've joined what your film is about that you're working on, or where you are at as a filmmaker, what's kind of going on, why are you here with us?
Okay, I'll start. So I haven't, I'm kind of a newbie. I haven't made a full feature. I have a little boutique production company and I specialize in short documentary making and fundraising videos and a lot of CSI projects. A lot of my work focuses on gender issues and social development and education. And I'm currently developing my first feature, which I think is a magical story. And so I'm not going to Sheffield. I just came for the lunch and to learn as much as I can. And I'm very excited about AfriDocs because I think it would be a great partner and platform for the project that I'm busy developing.
Cool.
Okay, so it's just me then.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm in development on a film called Mother City. Well, I guess we could probably say we're sort of shifting from development into production now. I don't really know what's the difference sometimes. It's a project about spatial justice in Cape Town, and we've been working with the Difuna and Reclaim the City. I was on the delegation that went to ITFA last year because my previous film, This Land, was in docs for sale, and I was trying to get development funding for this project, which we got development funding in November for this project, so now I'm working on this project.
And it just got selected for DFM?
Yes, okay.
Oh, well,
Yes.
Hasn't
I don't
been
know if
published yet,
It hasn't
right?
been published yet, so
But
okay, I guess.
technically, you can share it here, just don't tweet it. Because I think they're doing a
I don't know how
press
to
release.
tweet, but yeah.
But well done.
Great.
Really lovely project, thanks. I just wondered about your magical documentary. What's the name of it? So when we hear about it next time, we'll know it. Is there a working title?
Yeah. Nosipho's Magic Soup.
is it a documentary?
It started as a documentary, but it is going to be a documentary with magical realism. So it's still early. So I'm really trying to lock down its structure in terms of the style, because the research part of it has been a long journey, and that was essentially documentary. But it really is going to be a creative documentary, and I'm still struggling to lock down the style. But it has elements of magic realism. It's very difficult to explain right now, and I'm very shy to talk about it because I don't feel I'm ready yet, but yeah.
So this morning, 2 opportunities were mentioned that might be useful to you. One of
Yeah.
them is this pitch, what's it called? At Encounters, just before Encounters, what's it called? The impact
The
one.
impact, yeah. So that's actually the first weekend of Encounters. The second and the third is the Social Impact Boot Camp.
And it's open now for application.
Okay, I'll definitely look that up.
And the other one was,
And then the second opportunity is that at Encounters, DFA will be running a development-specific workshop. So in Cape Town, that's on the 9th.
That's all in Cape Town.
Yeah, and in Joburg it'll happen on the 2nd.
so the other nice person that you didn't quite meet was Khalid. You might know him, but he did offer to look at some trailers and offer advice, and that's huge because he's got a real story editor hat that he might help you with some structures. He says if you hit a roadblock, sometimes it's useful to
Yeah.
talk to people. I don't know who your editor is, but you know that's quite generous from an editor. So.
That is great. I do know Khalid.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but not very well, so I would love to.
So I think that was part of this meeting was that offer, because he was supposed to look at trailers and offer advice, but there was no time.
I don't know if there are any other questions about distribution or...
I wanted to say something about distribution. So I have been making films for a while, and I don't think I always call myself a reluctant producer because I don't really like being a producer. I just actually want to be a filmmaker and a director. But by default, I think in South Africa you end up being a producer because we just don't have the capacity and funds to have big producers. And a couple of big producers are Don, people that are real producers. I think we haven't really had much. There's been a couple of individuals and a couple of big projects that have had successful international distribution, but we haven't, and I don't think I've ever been really successful or successfully distributed. Films have screened on local broadcasters and international broadcasters, but my experience with international distributors have been really bad. I had a couple of films that was taken on by Windrose, who's a French-German distributor. I don't know if you know them.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, nothing really substantial happened. There was tiny little things that happened, but I always felt like as South African productions, it was scraps. Scraps were coming our way. And then I did a South African Norwegian co-production with Kyle a few years ago, which we had a lot of Norwegian, not a lot, but we had decent Norwegian funding for, and it was broadcast in Norway. And then PBS came on board as a distributor, and we were very excited about that because we thought, okay, great, PBS is going to distribute the film, it's going to go out there. And it did, but to this day, every time the film screens, all I get from them is a bill of how much money I still owe them. Because we don't have, as South Africans, we don't have the budget or the knowledge about that insurance that you need to have if you have an international distributor, which is an E&O insurance, which I suppose the bigger producers know about.
Expensive piece of paper.
Yeah.
That seems like
So and you know, we didn't have the capacity to pay for that kind of insurance. You know, we made the film, we used all the production money we had for making the film to make the film. So then you get to a point where you need the film to be distributed, and you need more money to pay for the things you need to distribute the film. And that we didn't have. So we signed a distribution deal where they would absorb that cost, but it would be deducted from every time the film sells. So like to this day, it doesn't matter where the film screens, it's like we'll get a little report, it's like now you owe us a little bit less. And that's the end of it. So just, I think we need to be aware of that, and we need to think about also upping our needs with regards to distribution funding. And that's
And E&O, put it in a line item right away, pay for it yourself. You don't want to be forever beholden to somebody who's paid for it after the fact.
What is it?
Errors and omissions insurance, and it's necessary for distribution, especially in North America, but other territories as well.
So yeah, this is the first time I dealt with a North American distributor. And sort of
They won't broadcast it without.
So effectively, it's an insurance that if you get into trouble, like let's say you didn't sign your location release properly, and there's a problem, the E&O money goes to insure you against litigation. So if something were to go wrong down the road, it pays for that process and the distributor doesn't have to pay for it. So it's an insurance policy, but no action.
And how do we know what amount to put as this line item? Who is this global
So
insurer?
in South Africa, Aon is a good place to speak to. CGM, who often do a lot of insurances, McLeod, who's amazing.
Yeah.
CGM do that as well. You just have to ask them, can you give me an errors and omissions quote? And then they'll look at your budget, what potential risk areas might there be.
But it can be as high as $5,000, right?
Yeah.
Or a little less. That's a lot of money for South African
That's a lot for
films.
South
That's
Africa.
not going to be, dollars. And then in addition to that, there's also all your deliverables. Like you might have made the film to deliver. I mean, we made the film for a Norwegian broadcaster, so we delivered via a file send. But for the distributor, you might need to deliver a HD tape or this or that. All those things are expensive, very
Quality
expensive.
control, sure,
Yeah.
very expensive.
Yeah.
DCP for festivals.
Yeah.
I think it's just a fact that documentary filmmakers and even feature filmmakers in this country mostly don't make money. It's just how it is. And certainly television producers don't make a lot of money. Or they make them incredibly fast under huge pressure of time. And over a period of time, maybe if you're making telenovelas, you make quite a bit of money, but it just seems to be that's the territory that we're operating in.
Peter, if we just put better line items in our budget and raise that funds in advance before you went down the rabbit hole and made the film and then didn't know how to get it anywhere, you should really not be making a film that isn't paid for. That's the sort of the first one.
That's realistic.
No, I know it's not
It doesn't
realistic,
work like that.
but okay, but in the global marketplace, that's how they're doing it. And it would be great if our filmmakers could start to have the ambition to get to that place. So if you had enough co-producers, like you had the Norwegian one, if you had a Norwegian one and a Dutch one and a French one, and they all brought the money from their territories in advance to you, you could have paid for that and then use that to bootstrap the rest of the world. But
I hear what you're saying, but I mean, we're starting with a very, in my opinion, a very dysfunctional national film and video fund. So as a starting point, we don't have a film fund, and then we don't have a broadcaster that's going to pay us up front. I mean, yes, AfriDocs is there, and we appreciate that, but I mean, you know that we can't make a film on the licensing fee. You don't have the capacity to do massive fee sales. So we're starting on a completely different playing field than the rest of the world, unfortunately. And that's, we're kind of like, then what? You can put these things on your line item, but if you don't raise the money, it's always just going to be a line item that's in a big fat negative.
We've had conflicting advice as well, because when Pascal was pitching Kenya, I can't remember exactly, speaking for you, she heard similar advice, Monica, as you've given previously, of your budgets need to be realistic on a global market, from a global perspective. But then Don Atkins, when I was chatting to him about this project and what the budget was, he laughed and he said, your budget's way too high. But
For a South African fund or for a...
Well, I was applying to soft money, global grants, and he said, no, it's too high, so you've got to bring it right down. So it's these two, I'm not sure what the answer is.
But it's also like Peter was saying earlier, somebody wants a script for a documentary, just make it up, it'll be partly real, partly not real. And the same with the budget. So if you're applying to that fund, he probably means pull it down so they feel like they've got a bigger chunk of the action. But if you're going for a pitch in front of all the broadcasters, if it's that small, they're going to think you can't deliver it, they won't trust you. So in a way, you don't want to have it published two different budgets, but in a way, you probably do have to listen to that kind of advice. But also know where you're going to get your return. So for instance, development funding, we don't have a great piece of the pie here, but in the rest of Africa, there's not much either. So I'm just going to put that out there. But if you could learn to co-produce in Africa, take that money from Tunis, take that money from El Gouna, and work together with an Egyptian, Tunisian, Algeria has a big film fund, and South Africa, and suddenly you're getting enough money to launch into the global space. But even Canada now, they're running out, they're looking for co-producers because they can't produce enough of a quality product to sell. So they're looking to come here to help get their projects finished. So it's actually an opportunity for you, because you're an established filmmaker, to start thinking co-production with Canada on these bigger documentaries. So, you know, the problem can become the solution, because you're forced to co-produce, and they're starting to be forced to co-produce. And the Japanese chap who came for Cape Town International Animation Festival, the reason he came 2 years in a row is he needs money from the rest of the world. His ecosystem no longer pays for his product. And he's one of the top companies in Japan for animation. But he has to start looking for money in co-production early on to get the product made, get it over the line to be able to sell it. So you can take all your experience, but put the budget in there so when you get those partners, they're starting to pay early on, and then, yeah. Shit.
That's not shame. I mean, I
And the
think
other
it's just a
point
fact. I think it's just when you
these-
recognise our situation. It is.
These producers also have awareness of specialized funds within their countries that they can leverage sometimes. So that's, you know, that they know about, that you will never know about.
Eurimage is now, Canada is a member of Eurimage. They're not in Europe. UK is no longer going to be a member of Eurimage because they're no longer part of Europe. So people, you know, you need to be aware, and that's $50,000, I think, for distribution, for these things that you're talking about.
Eurimage.
Eurimage. E-U-R-I-M-A-G-E-S. But it's a distribution fund, it's a support to get projects into market.
Liesl, I think you need to do a workshop on
I was just going to
distribution
say,
strategies.
I also
and,
wanted to mention that obviously the rebate is there, but the challenge with documentary is that we work in a pay-as-you-go method. We don't wait until we've got 80% of the money and then the film starts. You know, it's this natural evolution, it's an exploratory development, and then suddenly you find you're in production and you didn't realize. So because the rebate is set up by people who are service people, they think there is a start time and an end time framework. They don't really accommodate this movable feast of development. So if you want to try and use the rebate, which can be up to 35%, you need to, from the very beginning, start to think very strategically.
About the end,
About
because
how are you going to maybe then use that 35%. So luckily with documentary, your minimum budget is very small. It's only 500,000. So that, you know, it becomes much more possible. But then again, it's the costs of starting the shelf company, you need to have legal, you know. So again, it's not just 500, it's going to be a bit bigger. In terms of co-production as well, there's a lot of co-production interest, you know, it's much easier these days. NFF, surprisingly, is very efficient in that area. It's a 6-week turnaround now these days, so those opportunities are arising for co-production. So if you want to do an official co-pro, it's no longer a 6-month dragging here, you know. There's so few people doing them now that it's a real quick turnaround.
And there's a good track record with co-production and documentary. And once you've got your 35% here, like Mark told us in Berlin, he can now go to the Dutch fund and get the co-production funding there because he's an established co-producer. So he's automatically got rights to that money. He doesn't have to go with the same producer, he can go with the new one to work that. So you develop yourself as a global force then.
So when you're going to Sheffield, you want to have been onto the NFF website to have a look. Who are our co-production countries? You know, can I look for someone who's an Italian or German, or, you know, is there someone from the UK? Who are these folks I'm looking for? And I just know that if I meet those people, I'm going to say, you know, look, there is an opportunity to co-produce. You don't have to know all the ins and outs at this point, but at least you know that you can open the door to then, they know there's money on their side and we know there's money on our side, and then come back and find a producer who knows how to navigate that system.
They're in that flyer, they're listed in that flyer, all 9 of them. But you do have to know that some of the co-production treaties do not allow TV. So Canada does allow TV. France doesn't. The UK was just updated for TV. And we're hoping that France will be updated. So it's useful to know a little bit of the detail. TV, not TV. Documentary, not documentary. Yeah, but I think it's really good to do a little crib note on those and be aware that you can get into co-production fairly easily.
The great thing about us as documentary people is we're giving people. We're not people who keep our toes to ourselves. So someone like Mark Schwingers is always available. He's very experienced now with working in the Netherlands. He's hugely, available in terms of his experience. Someone like Neil Brunt is also hugely giving. So, don't feel shy to say, okay, look, I had a bike from so-and-so. They're German. I don't know what to say next. What are the options? This is potentially what they bring to the party. Can we work this? And then, people in the community will help you to work it out.
I think another thing also to throw into the pot on co-production, going to Sheffield and meeting potential partners is so I think everybody here probably knows about the IDFA fund, because a lot of us, that's one of the few funds that we can get funding from. But there's also the IDFA co-production fund, which you can only access, and it's a lot more money than the IDFA fund. And you can only access that if you have an EU co-production partner. So just have a look at that, because it's more money than what you get straight just as a developing country, DRC country producer. But if you find the right partner who falls within their basket of countries.
Okay.
Go.
So is Sheffield already online? Have you got the database for people you could potentially be meeting there?
No.
No,
It's not open yet.
Still waiting to get that. I did email him, and he replied and gave me a list of people, but nothing much about them. I guess one can do the massive homework of finding out. And just off the top of my head, I was wondering whether there wouldn't be some value in us splitting the work, finding out who does what, and then sharing it. Because otherwise it's an enormous and overwhelming and intimidating amount of work for everybody.
Is
So for Khan-
Andy not paid to do that?
He will give us stuff later on, and Tia said that the list is going to be issued, but I still think, in the festivals I've been to, it's really nice to know that, for example, this particular person did a previous documentary that was produced that was similar in content to yours, and then you can go and say to them, well, I had this experience again. Someone said, you did something like that, and they said, yes, and we don't want to do it again. Sorry, we're not interested in your project. But they might well say something different. Yeah, that's great. We are interested in that sort of thing. So one has to be quite detailed in finding out what sort of things they've been doing in the past. And it is true that sometimes, like Arte has done certain kinds, they've already done that character that you're interested in. So you can't go to Arte until you've got something different to say, perhaps. So that's very vital information.
But all of you need different things. Some of you need acquisitions, and some of you need development, and some of you need co-production. So you need to do your own homework as well. You can share the load, but for instance, Khan is online, right, Rudy? You've got the database. There's over 10,000 people already registered. You can download the whole database, do the research, go to their website, see who you want to meet. But in reality, you need to know who you want to see. And you already told me the list during the break. Paul, you want to know, you sort of know the big five that you're hunting for and maybe the second five. But that's the kind of thing, you need to start being ambitious and say, I want to meet someone from the World Cinema Fund, I want to meet someone from the Bertha Fund, I want to meet, because you guys are in development mostly. And then see who's coming from that region. So who's coming from Talent Campus if you want to get into Doc Station, or see who's coming from, So please download that database as soon as possible. Cannes and Toronto do Cinando. Berlin is also Cinando. But I just wondered if you knew what Sheffield was. Do they use Cinando or?
And we could get into Cinando through the GFA.
I believe so.
No, you get Sinando for the time of the festival, free. charge.
Okay.
Otherwise you gotta pay.
For
But
the
it might
time
not
of
be
the-
open for Sheffield, it depends what database they use, they might not use Sinando.
Like I'm already with Sinando, but just up to the 19th of May.
Okay, and it's, okay, up to the 19th of May.
No, yes, that's the festival from the
Another festival.
8th, no.
Can.
No,
This is
Cannes,
going to
Cannes,
Cannes.
Oh,
I'm going to
Cannes,
Cannes,
okay,
you know,
yes.
so.
Well, you can join Sinanda, but it's very expensive. That's,
No, but if I contribute, those guys who have been already at previous festivals, you get that book. You know, in the book, in that, you find the TV companies, you find the public, you find various companies. They specify exactly what they are looking for. So if you take the PT, the work, and go through there, you will find.
but I think the thing to do is pick the people who are going to Sheffield. Those are the people that you can look to meet.
And you want to set your meetings
But it-
before you go.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter, that is general, but you will find, BBC, you find certain companies at all film festivals. So it's just a matter of getting in contact with them, even before you go, to set up meetings.
A lot of the places I've been to have been really fruitless, and Writers Guild has, I think, perhaps wasted some of our time, because what they often are looking for are acquisition of completed material. And you go there with your interesting project in development, and they say, I'm not the right guy to talk to, but give me your email, maybe I'll pass it on to one of our development people who isn't here at the market. And then nothing happens. So I think that one has to be very aware of that, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're just going to be very frustrated.
But Sheffield is a commissioning
Yes.
market, so you will meet people with
For
development. So you do want to see the commissioners,
Yes.
not the acquisition department.
Yes.
And that's very important in France.
Yeah.
For instance, once you start talking to the acquisitions people, then they don't pass you on. I mean, it's like
Yes.
there's a Chinese wall. So
Yes.
be careful, acquisitions, don't give them your card. Stay with the commissioners and hopefully co-producing commissioners. So you actually should have a French co-producer before you speak to the broadcaster, because they won't commission directly.
Yeah.
They'll only buy. But if you've got a French co-producer, they can have that relationship.
What is the difference between being an independent filmmaker and going and pitching development of a film through soft grants and getting it commissioned? What is the...
The commission usually ends up owning the rights.
But how would you go to a commissioner and pitch, a sort of give an unsolicited pitch, and if they like the idea, they would then hire you to make your film?
Yeah.
Probably they would change it.
They would change it a lot, and actually that's one of the reasons that you think about distribution, because you want to make a film that gets seen, but preferably on license. But you do have to make a project that can make that channel slot, or that distribution platform. So it's important to have those relationships to help guide you. But if you own it, you can maintain some creative control. But if you are too creative and it doesn't suit their thing, you won't be able to sell it to them. So it's a fine dance, and I think you've experienced that more than anyone, you two. So, I mean, you sometimes have to make decisions which character. There's too many characters, sorry. Our slot can only concentrate on 3 main characters. You've got 5, so you've got to kill your characters for that channel. But that actually might make it easier to make it a TV-length film then, so it can work both ways, and you maybe didn't know how to make it a shorter film.
If I understand you right, there are 2 ways of doing it. Either you are licensed or you're commissioned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I know that theoretically, but practically, when we go and we, like these pitch sessions that Javier was talking about earlier, we may be pitching to a producer as a potential co-producer as we develop our project independently, or we might be pitching to a producing commissioner, in which case it's a different process, right? It's how does it work?
Read the
Do they say,
fine
I'm a commissioning producer and we're looking for?
Well, look at the title. If it says I'm a salesperson, then there's someone who's trying to sell a product. You're not going to buy their product, so you don't want to talk to salespeople. But you want to have your show bought, so you're looking for an acquisitions person. So if it says acquisitions or head of buying, or a commissioner who can maybe then say to you, great, I'll give you a license deal, or I love it so much, I'll buy the entire thing, someone else who is a producer or someone from a fund, you know, you're going to try and work out where do they fit into the ecosystem and are they useful to you or not. But ultimately, everybody is useful because maybe they're not the one you're looking for, but they know someone else.
And can't they, you could also hold back certain territories. If they're interested in European distribution, and you say, well, I want Africa, and they say, fine, we're not interested in Africa. You can then do a deal where you give them rights to Europe, and you've got Africa and maybe America or something like that. Probably not, but at least you can keep some of the territories for yourself.
And it doesn't have to be a forever deal either.
Yeah.
You can give it to them for 2 years. You know, it's up to you. But I agree, you need to also think about yourself and where you're going to be in 5 years. Maybe you're going to look for projects to come in as a co-producer. Once you've developed that experience as a local producer, you could be picking up projects to grow your whole company. If you start then having a co-producing division and you just churning out, you know, projects where you're a 35% owner and there's a certain budget and you've got that format, then when people come to you that you're meeting, you could start saying, well, I could produce that for you. I mean, maybe you don't want to do that because you're a director, but, you know, some of you are producers, right? How many of you are producers? Peter?
We wear several hats.
So be ambitious and throw the net wide. When you're in market, you might find somebody you want to work with, and it might not be that they love your project, but you love theirs. So bring them back here.
Because you've got local knowledge, obviously.
Yeah, and you've got local money. You've got something to offer.
Yeah.
Actually, if you,
Yeah.
if you just learn how to do it. What qualifies and spend? You need to know what qualifies as spend, so you get your full 35%. You know, distribution doesn't count, so you've got to raise that money somewhere else.
Yeah,
You've got
you
to
do post here and you get more money for that.
Yeah, yeah. And you could be a facilitator. You don't have to be a full-on co-producer with actual equity. You could just facilitate it.
You are an executive producer, investor.
And then they get 20%. And up to 25 if they do enough post here. They wouldn't do enough post to get 25, but yeah, 20% then. It's another way to keep your lights on, and hopefully you'll be doing projects you love, you know, because you've met cool people at Sheffield, or Hot Dogs, or IDFA, or Durban, or Cape Town, or here. I mean, some of you might have been falling in love with each other. I mean, there's some amazing projects here, and maybe you can help each other. But I would like you all to be really ambitious. If I might say, I think you need to think IDFA Master Stream, Sundance, Hot Dogs. You know, really think out of the box and then try to get there. You know, so you're saying I'm going to go straight online, but maybe this project is a festival film, but which festival? And be ambitious for it and then work backwards. And part of the problem for me with documentaries and incentives is you only have 18 months to finish it once you've got your letter.
2-year period, yeah.
Is it 2 years?
24 months.
24 for documentaries, thank you, I was looking for clarity. So be careful of your timelines, you don't want to miss that, because if you don't finish then you lose the money. So you really do have to work with somebody who's got some experience and can help you get that knowledge so that you can be an official co-producer with people, or an unofficial facilitating producer, and make enough money to keep your lights on, and hopefully if you own some equity you get some money back for years to come. I mean, could you imagine if our broadcaster worked well enough that you could renew your license every year or every 2 years? I mean, think of any great film like Long Walk to Freedom or Serafina, or I'm thinking of these big blockbusters. They're shown every year around those official times of year. They must get a license. I mean, I don't know, but they wouldn't have sold it to SABC.
SABC probably owns it.
Yeah, well, we don't know. But I'm just saying, if our broadcaster worked and you had a film that was that good that it needed to be shown every year as part of a celebration, maybe this woman's one, maybe that's Workers' Day next year. You know, I don't know. Or Women's Day, if it's around class.
right? It's not women.
There's a new DSTV channel which is re-showing, I can't remember the name of it.
Is it Encore?
Encore, yes, Encore.
All the SABC stuff.
It's all SABC things, and there is a lawyer called Hans Stradom who is representing a lot of producers because they're in negotiation, or actually conflict a little bit with SABC, who's offering the producers a pittance or a small amount upfront and say, here's the money, you can do it. But Hans and some of the other producers are saying, no, we're going to work in solidarity. We want a reasonably inflation-related fee. And he certainly got money from SABC for rebroadcasts for me quite often as a writer. Mnet don't pay anything for rebroadcast. But those are things that one needs to know about. And for documentaries, SABC make it extremely difficult to get money back. I sold a documentary to a couple of foreign broadcasters and we still didn't get any money from SABC because it was so convoluted to go through the legal, and it was only like 7 or 10 or 15,000 rand. In the end, it wasn't worth it to fight them. Not that they said no, they just made so many hoops that it was impossible to come through them all. But I think it's really good to, Hans works very much in the drama field, but there's no reason why he knows people at SABC, why he isn't someone that maybe the DFA should talk to, because he's got that experience.
Lisa, at what stage can one apply for the rebate?
So shall I run you through the
Yeah,
dummy's
run
guide
us
to
through
the
the
rebate?
rebate.
I feel like a school teacher who gives a lesson.
We'll take that on our books.
It's actually quite simple if you boil it down to its essence. So there's 3 different kinds of rebates, or 3 different flavors. The first one is the service rebate, which isn't really relevant to us, but it's for those big blockbuster series and features that come through, the Film Africas and the Moonlightings, and it's the Black Sails, and it's all that amazing stuff that brings huge forex into the country and creates amazing jobs, you know, for months on end for many of our colleagues. And effectively with that one, the key element is that the money you spend in South Africa, what they call QSAP, or Qualifying South African Production Expenditure, needs to be a minimum of 12 million rands. So it really does work for those big international series. They don't require any ownership to be in South Africa. So it's basically your service space. And there's no cap on the amount of money you can get out of that rebate.
No, they've capped it.
No, they capped it now. So there was a point where it was a cap, then they uncapped it. People were getting like 50 million, 100 million payouts. So now they've brought in some new measures to just
Capped it at 50 million.
yeah. So you kind of get a certain amount of chances to use it up to that 50 million. The one that we're probably most interested in is a twofold one, which is co-production and locally owned. So the key is that you need to own 51%, more than 50%.
For the co-production.
So for either, for the South African one. For the co-production, it could be as low as 20%. Because for co-pro, the minority partner would be as low as 20%. So if you think about it, it's quite challenging forex-wise if you've got an 80% German co-producer to get the money to kind of balance, because you need to spend a certain amount of money in South Africa. So for that one, it's usually minimum 2.5 million, but for documentary much lower, it's 500,000. It sits together with the South African owned one, which probably is the one that you would most likely use. So in that case, if you are bringing a commissioning partner on board, they need to not own more than 50%. So the key is for you to retain 50% of the ownership. And with that one, you get 35% back on the first 6 million of the qualifying South African spend. So obviously money coming that you're spending internationally, maybe on your post, or these extra things that add value. So it's 35% on the first 6 million. 35.
You have to spend 6 million.
No. So it would be 35 on the 500 or 35 on the million or, you know, whatever it might be.
After 6
Then
million.
after 6 million, it goes down. So 35 on the first 6 and then 25 on anything remaining.
And that's uncapped.
And that just keeps running. So, you know, if you're working on a 10 million budget, the first 6 would be 35 and the remaining 4 would be the 25.
But you first have to spend the money before you get it back.
No.
So you need to spend the money, but they pay you in 2 different methods. The one is you do the entire production, you have all the money in, and then at the end they give you the money back. So whatever you spent, you get the rebate. Or you can have the milestones method of payment, where there are certain milestones along the way. So they're divided into 5 milestones. The first one is when you sign your documentation to start the project off. And you need to have a completion bonder in place, who's kind of like checking that you're doing your homework properly, that the money's going out and that you're going to reach the goal that you need to reach. So they stand between the relationship of you, the financier, and the DTI. And they're basically making the financier feel comfortable and the DTI feel comfortable and say, the filmmaker is doing their job properly. They're on schedule, they're spending their money wisely, they will end up with the film on time to the right quality.
That can be built, the cost of that can be built into your budget.
And a portion of that is actually then subsidized by the DTI.
Okay, question then. Let's say the budget is 20 million, yeah? And then, you know, in a couple of years, a year, 2 years later, it's 40 million. You know, so you get a progressive payment, but you get it on 20 million, but not on 40 million.
So at the beginning, you have to go through an application process. It's like doing a co-production. They have to approve it before you can start. Based on that, they say, if your budget is 10 million, we will approve X amount. And, you know, if you go and spend the extra, that's your own business.
Yeah.
Ah.
So,
Based on your budget.
but we've given you the commitment that you know you can get that 35%. So you know going into that relationship with your co-producer, I've got X amount of money based on a general budget of, I think this film is a 500,000 film at 2.5, a 10 million, blow the lights out, you know. So you also want to have a sense of where do you sit in that range.
It doesn't exist ever. I have a little experience, a sad experience, I have to say, of feature film, where in one case, I spoke to the agent of a really well-known actor who said, and they were really friendly because I was introduced by someone that they liked and trusted, and were friendly and have a nice weekend, speak to you Monday, Peter, and all of that. And then they said, well, the question is, how much money have you got on the table? So I said, well, I've got the DTI rebate, which is 35% of the budget. Yes, but how much money have you got committed in writing, upfront, now? And this was really a horrible experience. And I said, well, actually, just some development money from the NFEF and studying for the script. And they said, oh, okay, hold on a second, I'll put you through to someone who can help you. And they put me through to a recorded voice, which basically said F off, but very polite. He said, we do not accept unsolicited proposals. Thank you, goodbye.
Oh, wow.
It was really unpleasant. It was the William Morris, it was a big agency in America. I think William Morris, but that was in terms of trying to get that actor. So that was one experience of, and then another one on a feature where someone who's also quite well known, and they'd done a similar film and loved the script, said so in writing, and said, you get 80% of the local funding, we'll come in for the last 20. And that was also a kind of kiss of death because it was useless.
So this is the thing.
So that's, I'm just saying that is,
we're used to going pay-as-you-go method, you know, gather the money, do a bit more. So they want to see what is your financial plan, where's the money coming from, what are the different sources. Great, 35% is coming from the DTI. But where is the rest of the money coming from? So you can't go into that application process and just go, well, you're going to give me 35, I hope and pray that the rest will come. You know, you kind of need to be a little bit further down
You
that
need
road.
10% to unlock it, right?
So in order to be able to apply, you need to have at least 20% in.
Is it 20 now?
But if you have that commitment in writing that you're getting, they cover so and so that amount, and with that you go to a fund, you know, you take a loan.
You can go to the bank, it's a bankable letter.
Or it would be more, you know,
but then you're going to pay interest. So usually what you do is you do the milestones method of payment, where they're drip feeding you as you go along. So the first milestone is you sign the contracting at the beginning with the completion bonder who's going to check your work. And a portion of that fee of the completion bonder is paid for by the DTI. So it really reduces that kind of headmaster, headmistress role, you know. And they're usually very financially oriented people, so they'll be checking that your paperwork is correctly done, which is a pain, but you know, they make sure that it's done cleanly. Then the moment you start shooting, you get another payment. When you finish shooting, so end of principal photography, another payment. Picture lock, the fourth payment. These are all 20% amounts. So, you know, if you haven't spent entirely 80% of the money, you could be on picture lock and you're going to spend quite a bit of money still in finishing. You know, you may only have spent 60% of your money. You can still get that 80%. And then you go through an audit phase, deliver the film, and then you get the last payment. So you generally plan that 80% of the money is going to come quite cleanly, and then that last payment, it's sometimes a bit dodgy as to when you're going to get it, because they obviously have money coming from Treasury, filtering down into DTI. You know, that whole process happens. The money comes from government, so sometimes the wheels turn slow.
There's also the other, the BEE one, which gives you 50%. So that's really
So this is
good.
the third one. The third one is amazing. You basically need to have a minimum of a level 3 company, BEE scorecard level company. It's considered to be the rebate that's used for medium size. So you can't be a beginner. You need to be a medium-sized company that's had a bit of a filmography. You've made a few productions. You have to have a person of color in the role of producer and of director. And it's 50% of the money, the qualifying spend. But it's a revolving door, you can only use it 3 times. So it's kind of like a bootstrapping. And once you've utilized that and maxed it out, you go back to the South African co-production one and use that. So it's kind of like a bit overwhelming, but it is doable. People who've got smaller dockies have used it. It is possible. You just need to speak to producers who've used it, who tell you what the tricks of the trade are, and then you apply those.
And you said both the producer and the director.
If it's the black emerging filmmaker one, yeah.
It's not just 2 key creatives.
No, it's ownership
It's
as well.
ownership as well.
Ownership.
So obviously the SPCV company needs to
Yeah,
have certain
no, but I mean
ownership.
producer and director.
Yeah.
Not producer and writer.
It used to, in the past, it used to be either or, but now specifically those 2 need to be.
And when you're
And
making...
obviously the more staff, the better.
When you're making these films, you can't be selling your films to a broadcaster as a disguised commission. So you have to be really careful when you're selling your project. If you just get tired of it and you want to just sell it, if you've taken DTI money, you're not allowed to sell it as a commission. So it can't be a disguised commission, like 2 years after you own it, it reverts ownership to the broadcaster. Be really careful with that, because the DTI isn't happy when those things happen, because basically then they're subsidizing the broadcasters and they make enough money. Thank you.
So
The DTI wants you to have the money.
Yeah.
That's the point. And you to have the IP so that you can keep getting some small return on this amazing investment.
And they're not creatively fussed about what you're making.
No.
They don't really give a damn. If the numbers work, the numbers work. They don't have all the hang-ups that the NFUF have about the content. So
Just not pornography.
you know, if you can, yeah, not that one. But if you can tick all the boxes in the list, it's very predictable. And you can go down the list and say, my weak point is here, how can I address that? Or, no, I actually do tick all of these boxes, it's very possible. How do I now roll that out?
I think it's a bit like, I mean, for anyone's young enough or old enough to remember when your first ATMs came in, people were a little bit confused by them. And, oh, I like the experience of dealing with a teller. And, you know, quickly got used to it. So I think it's a thing that there's an unpleasant learning curve, but once you've learned it, it's quite easy perhaps to...
So how many people have used the DTI rebate here? Anybody? 1? And nobody else has used the rebate?
I would love to.
Not direct.
So many of you are interested, I offer training in this area, you can get my card afterwards.
Okay.
You do offer
I either do the rebate for people if the project's big enough, but particularly in the documentary space, I have some clients in Joburg who I train. So I tell you, go and cook the cake according to this recipe. Okay, yes, now we're going to add the icing and the sprinkles and things together and make the cake look beautiful. So it's the inner parmen of DTI.
So chocolate flakes?
Depends what you need.
Does your job title in that case fall under film finance?
Well, that's very
I wish. I wish I had money from film finance.
So it only works with co-productions?
No, so it can be your own South African owned production.
So it's called a South African rebate or co-production rebate. So if you're qualifying as a co-production, you are then South African. You see, so it just is an extra level of tick boxing between both countries, and that in that case it's the 20-80 split. But in reality, it's just talking about the money you get back. So that qualifying South African spend is 35% of the first 6 million, 25% thereafter. So Paul, maybe your example, what budget are you looking at for your project coming up?
Overall, it was close to 7 million over 20 years. It's very easy to spend that money in 20 years to sustain something.
But you wouldn't qualify because the time didn't work, you didn't apply in time.
Yeah.
So you can't retrospectively apply for a rebate.
But going forward for your new train, for the ring story, you should examine what the possibilities are.
Definitely. Because that'll probably be expensive.
So the other key is you have to finish the project within a 2-year period, which for us is maybe sometimes a bit challenging. So you just have to time it cleverly.
Somebody said earlier that you need 20%.
You need 20% of the money committed.
Before you go to DTI.
So they basically say to you, it's that end chunk, it's that last amount of the money. They're, you know, if they take long and you say, but don't start until you've got something in already.
You need to have ticked a few boxes. You need a distributor as well in South Africa. And would AfriDocs qualify as a distributor, or is it?
It would most likely.
So there you go. So the distribution doesn't have to happen right away.
You've got a distribution letter, so that helps you tick that box. And that's a really useful service because it's difficult to get the SABC to give you a letter in advance. They want to see the project. It's difficult to get Mnet to buy documentaries. Face it, it's not their sort of strength. So you've got an amazing resource here is to have a tick box that's very clear. So and she's not exclusive. If you sell it to someone else, it's fine. So, yay, AfriDocs.
So usually what you would do is go to a festival like Sheffield, look at the options, find out who's interested, and then based on that evaluate, okay, so if it's going to be a co-production, how much money can they bring, how much money can we bring from our side, and kind of work out the possible permutations and say, okay, look, there's like 4 options on the table, which one do we think will work best?
And the 20%.
And the film will guide you, won't it? You know, you're going to find the people that need to be attracted to your film, ultimately.
So the 20% could be, for example, the NFF has given you 300,000 rand.
Correct.
For production money.
Yeah.
That money isn't in your pocket yet because they'll pay it in tranches, but there is a firm commitment. That allows you a 3 million rand budget to make the film. Or that's only 10%, sorry, it gives you 1.5 million budget.
But you've got something, yeah.
Or could it be that your foreign producer says, I have got access to this fund, I've got us now 20% of the budget, here it is, commitment from whatever, the Deutsche or something, and here it is, and you take that to DTI and that's your money.
Yeah.
You don't actually have to physically money in the bank, or not?
No, it's the commitment.
It's the commitment.
So 2 people...
But if it's foreign money, you have to be careful that you don't slip into the foreign services kind of box, because it's a different
So how
path.
much ownership will you have on the project,
You've got to have what?
You've got to have 50 plus, you've got to have
50% ownership.
50% ownership, yeah.
50, wow.
If you're going to do the local one, if you're going to do the co-pro,
it's
minimum 20.
Yeah, so if the co-pro you're doing 20 and the co-producer says, I've got a fund,
I've got all this money.
20% of the money,
let's go, yeah.
You're ready to go to DTI.
Then what's the catch in the co-production one? You only get the option of getting all the money at the end, 35%.
No, you also get it, you can get it paid
You can
in the
cash
different
flow it the same
milestones.
way.
But the only thing is you're going to need to do the official co-production authorization with NFEF first.
Okay.
So that's just going to add some extra time to your paperwork process. So they do a provisional approval at the NFEF, then you go to the DTI, you make the form. Then before the final payment will come out, you need to get the final ruling back with NFEF again.
And so
So
then
yes.
it becomes
Let's
incredibly
go.
important because say your budget for your film is 3 million rand, which is reasonable for certain kinds of documentaries. The NFEF decide they like your project, they've already given you development money. You then get their 300,000 rand, then you go to your foreign co-producer and you say, I actually don't need 20% of the money, I've got 10, you give me 10, get from your fund or whatever, and then you've got 20, then you go to DTI and you really get another 35 if you're clever enough in terms of the qualified South African spend. So that means you've got 55% of the money already, and then hopefully broadcast.
Some other people will come in, yeah.
Do the rest. But it is a, I mean, I just think it's what's intimidating is the amount of time that it takes to do all of this. When you're kind of struggling to earn, but you're fully occupied earning a living, you still have to find that time, but you otherwise don't do it, I suppose. It's just unavoidable.
So there's 2 people up in Joburg who are currently preparing to do their first rebate. It's Sihle Klopa who's doing the Labola movie, and Malatelo is also doing her whenbabies.com. Now, they've actually been working on those projects for quite a while already, and you kind of would think, but maybe they should be done by now. But they've specifically been setting it up in such a way that some of what they've been doing is to get the interest of hot docs, get that blue ice money in, get all of these different people interested. And they have been shooting, but ultimately that's development shooting. They will now go through a formal process with other people's money and do the higher level version.
Yeah.
So the preparation is kind of like I make it as, going along with my own resources, shooting my own stuff version. Then when lots of people are keen and want to jump on and bring lots of money, then they're going to do the higher end version.
Does that work have any sort of financial value? So if, for example, you approach a small film company and they say, we will give you labor and hardware to the value of 100,000 rand or something, does that count on your line item?
Deferrals don't count. Yeah. So you need to see the money flowing through an account. So yeah, if you come back from Sheffield and there's options and you want to chat about it, please give me a call.
But don't the deferrals, once you start getting paid, then the money going through, then you can QSAP it.
Yeah.
So you can't put the deferral into the, well, you can put it into the budget, but you have to have had money going through to get the money back.
So it doesn't go toward that 20%. It can't go toward that first 20% that you need.
Yeah.
You need 20% hard cash.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You've
So
got
someone
money in the bank, you just need the commitment.
Yeah,
And then you need to
financial
also, you need to open a company in the name or
So you'll have a
a
shop.
vehicle.
You'll have a
It's
shop.
not enough to open, just for anybody who's interested, the DTI, I think maybe it is useful, made me open a bank account, a separate bank account, but which was Peter Goldsmith trading as indecent exposure. And then that's separate from Peter Goldsmith's account. And any money I get from NFEF goes into the trading as, and I then, Peter Goldsmith invoices the other thing. So then, and they also, this is also useful perhaps, I think.
For Peter, that's a must, you've got to have that to be
Yes. No, I think it's absolutely fine. I don't have a problem with it. They are now asking for a detailed budget and cash flow and expenditure, even when they pay you for the scripting. I've spent much more money than I'm getting paid scripting of my own anyway, so it's very easy for me to do. But even if you're paying yourself 20,000 for the script or whatever it is of the money that they've given you, they want to see it displayed with a statement, a financial statement matching the bank account exactly to the rand.
So I think that speaks really to what Monica was saying earlier. We need to build these extra costs in the E&O, you know, where's the accountant going to come from? You know, these extra skills.
But then you
that
build
needs
it
to be
into the
built in.
budget. No, the accountant, you build it into the budget. When you get money from the lottery, for instance, I mean, you have to submit a report, and I spent about 12,000 rand on audit and accounting fees, you know? And that's part of the report.
Can I
think
tell
it's
you
fair.
a mistake that some new companies are doing is they're not spending enough in the right areas. You need to know what your QSAP is and you need to budget accordingly. So now you're at quarter 4, you've got your 80% of your budget, and then you look at what's spent, and you actually, in the last 20%, you're going to have to give some back because you haven't spent enough QSAP. Even though you're getting 20%, 20%, 20% because you're hitting those milestones.
So working
So
with
be
a
careful.
can be quite a counterintuitive experience for us as producers because we always want to try and keep the costs down, keep the money back, don't spend. Effectively what you're trying to do is push the money out because you'll get a portion back. So that balance between holding back and pushing out is the key.
And
Because you want to hit the target that
Yeah.
you said you were going to hit.
you've got to
Get
keep
that portion back.
Yeah, keep an eye on that, because if you're not spending and then they've given you money against it, then you have to give
You
it
have
back.
to give it back, yeah.
So that's just the problem, you know, so we hear of people never going back to the DTI for their 5th. Well, actually, maybe they didn't go back for their 5th because they actually now owe money on that project, which is terrible. You don't want to do that. Makes you look unprofessional.
Yeah.
Get your budgeting right in the beginning. And you know, people can be forgiven for mistakes. It's fine to make a mistake, but have an expert check your stuff. So I would think working with somebody like a Liesl is a great idea for your first time, maybe even your second time, because you've got somebody else checking your work. You know, like Rudy was telling us earlier, on his official documents they put Rudy instead of Rudolph, and now he's in trouble because it's a legal document with a nickname. So really, you don't want those kinds of things. Somebody else would have spotted that. So are you getting help with your rebate project that's coming up? Are you?
No, I haven't started that yet.
Okay.
But I
But-
will. I'll come and see you.
No, this was incredibly
I'm
helpful.
willing to drink Starbucks, so you know, I don't really care.
I can be able to start.
I think you would boycott Starbucks if it's still not there.
Khalid said that he doesn't have meetings where Starbucks is served. He only wants good coffee. So all of us who want to meet with him have to produce good coffee
It
and
has to be
chocolate.
ethical coffee.
And chocolate.
I want to ask one other question which I think may be interesting to people as well. I've tried to approach Netflix and it's almost impenetrable.
It's like speaking to
They will only accept projects that are introduced by a producer that they already know.
yeah.
And I mean, I do know 1 or 2 people, but then you suddenly have to give them your project to get them to speak to Netflix. And it seems to be the most stupid in a way, that for want of being prepared to look through some stupid rubbish projects, they are throwing out the gold with the dross, with the rubbish. I'm sure most projects are bad, but let's say there's some really good ones, they don't want to see them. And you can't get to talk to Netflix in South Africa
Yeah.
if you haven't worked with them
if
before.
you're working in the factual area, wildlife, you know, kind of like more factual type stuff. I don't know how to explain this. So
National Geographic.
Yeah, what we would call factual stuff that's on SABC. So not creative docus necessarily. Off the Fence is a good connection through. Because you basically speak to them here in Cape Town and then they push you through their London office and you go through those structures.
And I think AAA have the fiction in Joburg.
Yeah, so Mayenzeke and
AAA, Mayenzeke and
Pascal, who are with Hoplite, they're also great in terms of if you're in the Joburg space. And because they're South Africans, Shireen,
But they
Mayenzeke
don't.
and Pascal are very open to connecting you for free. For free, you know. So chat to
Dockies
them.
here is off the fence, aggregating.
Yeah.
So they're basically aggregators towards the Netflixes, and they have other outputs. I don't know their whole business model.
So as local people here, they wouldn't be going to Netflix directly, but they will, you know, through their structures, pass you to their people who will then be able to speak to the Netflix guys.
That's all. Was it Helena?
So Shireen King is the person in Cape Town to chat to.
And she speaks at some of the festivals usually to talk about the business model.
Ellen,
Ellen,
yeah.
And for the Nat Geo type stuff, you've got Shireen Engels, what's her name? Laverne Engels.
Laverne.
She's based in Joburg, but she comes to Cape Town, and she presented at the Wavescape Festival to just describe her business model. And she brought Nat Geo here, decision makers, who took meetings after and a couple months later. But there were a couple months of preparations then, getting ready for the pitch. And some of those companies met those decision makers here. So that was nice. They were coming to look at other projects that are in the country, and then they took meetings with creative producers like yourself. So if you're ready, you'll get those meetings. But you need to know the local people and start working with them.
Your other option locally is Spear Films.
Yeah, of course.
Because Spear Films,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
SPIER. So they will link you then to their guys in Iceland or in London or wherever.
Yeah. And they're usually at Sheffield as well.
Yeah, I can all drive from Sonia Blanc.
So yeah, it may not take it all, or it may, you know.
What defence would be the best locally for documents?
Well, I find Shireen will guide you. If she doesn't help you directly, she tells you who to speak to.
You used to it?
Yeah.
Just before we go to the next.
So then if you put that money into your film, that can attract you as a private person tax deduction. But I stand to be corrected, it might not be, might not be the filmmaker themselves. I have to check it. I'm not good at tax, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't work in the fine details. But basically, all the people that Liesl mentioned, they know about this S12O, and it's on this flyer as a little reminder. You can look it up, it's one pager, and then you get a tax interpretation. Once you've got your DTI paper, you can get this note, and then you can go to your investors, and their investment into your SPV is instantly tax deductible the year of the investment, and it stays for 10 years without attracting tax on the profit. Now, you guys aren't going to make profit, but hopefully you'll make enough to return the investment to the people that lent you the money, and they can still then partake in terms of equity in your project. But people do different packaging with that.
So would you get something, say for example, Johannesburg Art Gallery wants to show a film I've made, and I can say to them, I've got the DTI rebate, you give me some money, you get out of it rights to show the film at the gallery, and I get the money to make the film. And if the film makes profit, then you get some of the money back.
No.
That won't work.
Well, you can do that. That's perfectly allowable, but it wouldn't be tax deductible. So it's not the
It wouldn't be tax
S12O,
deductible.
because you have to be an individual at risk with your own cash.
Right, got it.
So, but for them, that would be a pre-sale. I would just do a simple pre-sale and take that paper and finance it.
Yes.
There are companies that do finance good paper, like Us Plus will finance a deal. Us Plus,
That's not you.
US, Us Plus.
Okay.
It's sort of social money. They're trying to get money into circulation in unbankable industries, because typically you're too risky to go get a mortgage for your film.
Yes.
Transaction capital is also in this space. It's not cheap, but they can, let's say you're running a printing company as well as making films, and you've got a big printing machine that's 30 years old, but it still works. It, layers all the colors. But because you've been depreciating it each year, it's worth nothing on paper. But like transaction capital will come in and say, but it's R1 million worth of metal. If we just junked it and took it to the scrap heap, it would be worth R1 million. I'll give you 80% of that R1 million. Or they also cash flow forward sales. So if you have an invoice book, they'll cash flow your forward sales. But there's quite a few companies that do that. But these transaction capital, they spoke at our finance workshop last year. So it's in our Dropbox. We send you a link to our Dropbox to all our our workshops, so you can just go there. But there's also a few banks, I can't tell you their names, but essentially the big banks are looking at corporate paper around film. So let's say you've sold your film and you get R1 million after it screens. That's the day they pay you. You can sell that piece of paper a month in advance or up to 3 months. Banks that can go 3 months in advance. After that, it's too risky. And so you can sell that invoice to them, and then they can help you to make the film, because you need the R1 million to make the film, or to make the documentary, yeah, or to do whatever it is. And typically those are being done around, magazine programs, reality programs, that you don't get rebates around reality programs, you don't get rebates around a number of programs, but these are the films that often sell, and they do have a continuous cash flow on delivery. So it's a chance to cash flow corporate paper. And so we can take other meetings with you on that. We will do our finance workshop again this year. The IDC is coming this year. Last year we had one of the completion bonders came and gave a presentation, Jane Fry from Film Finances. All of that's in our Dropbox, those presentations. But it's good to get it fresh, so we're just taking meetings with the FNB on Monday to come up with a date. The other day that's in our calendar is July 5th, which is our first Thursday, and it's going to be at Minister Windy's office on Long Street, so I hope you can drop by.
We'll be in Sheffield. Oh no, we won't, it's true. No.
It's July 5th, we're doing a first Thursday at the Minister's office. He does first Thursday there every month, and it's a great chance to go and meet different people from across. I mean, you're all documentary filmmakers. You can go and meet Minister Windy. You can go and meet, this week they had, or last week they had everybody who does recycling. And the styrofoam, do you know that styrofoam, when it gets recycled, gets turned into this amazing insulating concrete, and that's what they use to make the mocha. And it's lightweight bricks, you can drop it, they don't crack, and they look just like normal bricks, but you can make it into any concrete brick, and it's fire resistant and insulated, and it's water resistant, so things don't crack. Anyway, they gave me a brick and everything that you can recycle, so I'm making a little stand at work to say, please don't keep throwing things out. So just rinse off your dirty plastic and put it in a clear plastic bag, and then everything can be recycled now, pretty much. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Finally.
There are a
So,
couple of companies that collect recycled
yeah.
stuff
Yeah,
from your house.
I live in Komiki and I've been separating my rubbish for 4 years, I think.
Yeah, but actually you don't even have to separate it, because we live in a country that has a lot of employment needs. So people do separate it for you, it just has to be in a
But
clear...
they have a separate truck that comes and
Oh,
fetches it.
yeah, that's true. There is a separate truck. So the other thing you need to be considering is on Tuesday this week, the film funding fair. It's just a chance to check out what government's doing and these thought leaders who've made a lot of money. Maybe you'll be one of them one day and you'll be speaking to us. They did have a pitch process, so if you had a company that was scalable, you could have pitched your company and gotten into the pitching meetings. I think that's pretty exciting. So take some of these flyers if you want. It's like a little snapshot of South Africa. We are one of the top 10 production centers in the world. You do have a government that cares. A lot of people don't. You can shoot everywhere, and there's a lot of professional associations, so please join them. Women, join SWIFT. Thank goodness you're all in DFA. DFA rocks. 10 years old, apparently. Well done. You're going to throw a party.
We're turning 10 at the end of the year, so let's hope so.
So AISA is the latest one. It's not on here. They don't have a logo, but Make Games SA tried to become a professional association like DFA, and apparently SARS thought they were a sports club and said no. So they've kept that as the hobby association, and then the 20 or 30 companies that are professional formed AISA, and they're the ones that go to Cologne Games. Did you know that gaming is going to be in the next Olympics as an official sport? So it's serious, it's serious. We're moving into apps. Humans are narrative beasts, and we love stories. So we need really good storytellers in our games. And Minister Windy actually gave R1 million out last year as a prize for an app. And all they wanted was like a one-pager to enter. And then those 4 projects that were selected, and they weren't game companies, they were storytellers, much of them. They saw a need to have a game around this edutainment idea, and those 4 winning sort of finalists were given 50,000 rand of development, and they got kind of wireframes made so that people could play them and judge them. And then the winning one got the rest of the million to go into completion, and it was basically a purchase. And it's being used in all these places in the province. And basically games, if you play the game, you end up with giving some of your social data to the ministry, and then in return you get extra free Wi-Fi to go on Facebook or whatever. So it's an exchange of information. And what ministry wanted from that were ideas of how to do better. Well, the winning game basically allowed you to build an informal settlement using blocking techniques. So you could block to have good fire routes, or block to have a library and a police station next to each other and a school. And basically the government could then take these ideas of how people wanted to live and maybe design better blocking for better informal settlements. Although they're not informal settlements anymore, they're more formalized. But it's almost like having feedback focus groups. And it was a really good game. Apparently it's really fun, but I never played it. I'm not a good gamer. Other things you can do to sell your country is to talk about the great number of films that are shot here. Sorry there's not so many documentaries on here. That's kind of an oversight. Sorry about that. But when you look at the statistics of what you guys are doing in terms of getting permits to shoot in the city, you guys are doing lots of business. So keep it up. Keep doing it legally so you don't end up with E&O errors. But most people don't buy E&O, and they don't bother with international distribution. The other clearance you need is on music rights, and I've had some people sit in my office and go, I haven't got my final clearance from that. And I went, why are you entering a festival if you haven't cleared your music? It is chain of title. Think of it. Please put your music budget in there. Pay for it. You can just pay for 10 years if you think the film's only going to have a life for 10 years. And then you can have an option for another 10 years. You can have options just for festival rights for music, so you don't have to pay for all of the rights until you're exploiting them. But you can have a waterfall of rights. So she knows all about it. So talk to smart people who've done this. But you don't have to spend all the money right away. But if you want to get it incentivized, then spend it right away. So it's this toss-up. You have to spend it to get some back. So if it's a worthwhile film and you're using South African music, then please consider also that you've got great musicians here, great sound, great post. A lot of people want to do the post in their country when they're in co-production because it's easier to do that. But remember that you've got great value for money here. Stellenbosch wants to put live music on so you can actually have their students helping you with sound design, using orchestral music, which is apparently, when you're really good, you can hear the difference between can music and orchestral music. So that's something to think about. And I haven't been out there, but apparently it's very inexpensive because of their Kaizen. I mentioned that at the beginning of this, but I'm pretty excited. I'm probably going to go out there soon. Then there's been a new studio built. Karen Zoid built a new studio out in Philippi called Mothership. And that's available as sound. There's lots of post places in Woodstock Observatory. But you can shop around. There's really good musicians here. So you don't have to just buy the really expensive music unless it's part of your film. So think about great sound design, but please record really good sound. Ambient sound as you go along. Don't try to fix it in the post. That's probably the #1 problem for films coming from South Africa is there's not good ambient sound, natural sound, and silence. I mean, a lot of the time, not when I'm talking, but you know, when you're in a room with people and there's emotion, people are quiet. You don't want music over that. You want people to feel that gap, that emptiness, and fill it with their own emotion and their own imagination. So really, when you're watching good films, see how little music some of them use. And so you can get away with less money if you use your sound properly. And yeah, so any other closing ideas of, I mean, because we're starting to wrap, you're going to start doing questions now, right?
So I think we should break for a cup of tea and for everyone to switch their legs. And then, is anyone interested in doing a test pitch for us to give feedback on?
Great.
I know we should have spent the entire afternoon doing so. But really, you know, this is an opportunity if one or two of you want to do that and get feedback from the room. That's cool. If you feel you need more time and are feeling shy, that's also cool. The only other thing we need to do is to make a list of those questions for Andy. So, you know, please guide me as to what you would like to do. Maybe you want to think about it while you make yourself a cup of tea.
Can you just break down what Andy's role is? Because I must say I'm a bit clueless about this whole process of going to Sheffield and what's entailed.
So the way it usually works is there's an organizer on this side who's Thea that's been working with you thus far. But then there's an organizer who makes sure that things go smoothly and that we get value for money on the other side, and Andy's that person. So be it organizing a speed dating event or, you know, something specifically for SA Indies, where is the stand that you're going to be meeting on, you know, all of those things, he'll arrange that. But then part of that is the added value in terms of individually, what do you guys need? So like Paul was saying, he's got 5 top guys that he wants to meet, and then the second tier. If you can then say to Andy, look, I think this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm in development, I'm maybe looking for acquisitions people, I'm not too sure, what do you think? You know, he will be able to then say, okay, I think in this area, these are people we need to try and connect you with. So he knows that space really well. I think Moses, you've had some good input from him thus far. So, you know, if you are clear about what you're looking for, he can help you look for those things.
Okay, so we can actually direct those questions
So you
directly
can
to
say,
him anyway. and
look,
that's fine.
I'm in this stage and I'm not too sure, but I think I need X, Y, Z. What do you think? Then he'll say, okay, we need to look for that one and that one and that one. You know, I'll connect you with this person or that person.
It's really about knowing what you want. So the practice pitch today, you could be saying, I don't know what I want. You could be getting feedback from all these people to say, I'm looking for, actually I don't know that part yet, but I'll move on. And you do your whole pitch, but the part of what you're looking for, if you're unclear, this room could help you clarify that. And then when you then speak to Andy, you could say, I think this is what I need. You can add that, but at least you're even more clear. But you know, you should know what you want when you're going to a market. You should be able to write down, these are the companies I want, this is why I want to meet them. And you should know what those companies do. So Nat Geo, Nat History, you know, you need to know what the 2 different strands are and why you're meeting them and why your film would be right for their channel, if that's who you're meeting. So I think it's really important to be pitch ready in that way, because you don't want to waste other people's time. But even if you're meeting people and it's like this speed dating and they're not all for you, you're making that long-term connection the way Andy Khalil said this morning. Make friends. Maybe not this project, maybe the next project.
Yeah.
So the main thing is to introduce yourself and to get to know them so you have a friend.
But to ask for advice, I went to ITFA once and not a single person I met with was interested in anything I was selling. at all. And every single person said, you're at the wrong festival. But it got me get my head around the situation much better, you know. So it was a bit of a fail, but it was definitely a beneficial growth experience in that I knew next time I need to go down that path, not this path. So, you know, don't panic about if you don't get those 5 people. It's all going to be beneficial.
No, and I made the assumption that Andy's role was to team us with the right people to meet, you know. But then, you know, I don't know. I'm willing to split the workload, as you say, Peter. I mean, and to just do a rough Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't even have to be that detailed. This is this person and his list.
Let's get the list, but I mean, the point that was made was a very valid one, I think.
That we
Kind
it's
of
so
rather
specific.
that each one's looking for something different,
Yeah,
and maybe that was not thought through for me.
Yeah.
What I just wanted to say that someone once said to me, when you're interested in someone, he said, you've got to be enthusiastic, he said, but be careful that you don't cross the line into desperation. I think that's more off-putting. And I think when one's pitching, if one comes over as needy, which I know as I tend to do, or you turn enthusiastic or kind of have an edgy quality, you put people off. They want to feel that you are, you know, you're very keen, you're passionate about your project, but you're not desperate. That's my experience. I just have to tell them, don't be too desperate. I know that, you know, they don't, for them you're just one of many possibilities. And for you, they are the possibility at that time that you're talking to them.
Time for coffee? Shall we get that coffee machine running?